as part of the grant work, we got a permit and did a lot of work at the Tomoka Basin State Parks. But this was a project that we had kind of started engaging with Phil Rand before we got the grant, and were able to kind of do a lot more work there through the funding from the grant from the state. But we have some more exciting plans coming up in the future as well to keep doing monitoring and interpretation and some other kind of projects at these parks. So the Tomoka Basin State Parks are located here in Northeast Florida in southern Flagler and northern Volusia counties. And it's actually a collection of 4 different state parks that are kind of all managed as one big park. So we have Bulow Plantation Ruins Historic State Park, Bulow Creek State Park, Addison Blockhouse Historic State Park, and Tomoka State Park. And so just a lovely collection of some beautiful old Florida there. Some overview, just some stats. We were able to monitor 45 sites out in the park. We started.
You're still showing the title slide, is that correct?
Let me reshare then.
We want to see your gorgeous photos.
I worked hard on a map. How about now?
Ah, yes. If you want to go back.
Excellent. So here's our map of our different parks. And as I say, the stats, so we monitored 45 sites. We started before the pandemic broke out and had a long pause in monitoring, but we're able to get back out and finish up some monitoring efforts at the beginning of this year. I think just shy of 60 sites, and we did have some access issues, which I'll talk about, trying to get out to some of the sites physically. So did pretty well in reaching a goal of 45. About half of these sites need updates to the Florida Master Site File forms, and a lot of this was basic GIS data was incorrect, or the site was larger than we thought, or than it was originally recorded, or the folks who recorded it just wrote that it was a shell midden and didn't find any diagnostic artifacts. But in revisiting the sites, we found St. John's pottery on the surface, so we were able to add more information about the sites to the state's database here. We did record 5 new sites. So we found 2 new shell middens, as well as 2 sites related to coquina quarrying and the enslaved people who worked there, and then a turpentine camp as well. So we documented 2 sites with the terrestrial laser scanner, and we had an infinite number of ticks. This is the tickiest place I have ever worked in Florida, and we definitely have all sorts of methods for getting them off of you: lint rollers and duct tape and double socks and all sorts of strategies. So if you have questions or need suggestions for tick repellent and the permethrin, just go straight for the permethrin if it's as bad as it is at Tomoka. These parks are really cool because there's such a wide variety of different sites that are there. I think the area it goes back about 6,000 or 8,000 years into the Archaic period, and of course the Tomoka Mountain Midden Complex is one of the best known sites from this area, and it has an archaic component. But we see that Native peoples lived there, throughout the St. John's period. They were there. There was a mission there. They were there during the colonial period, and then we start to see a lot of industry and plantations and homesteads that are set up during the colonial period, both Spanish and British, and then American. Bulow Plantation is there, so a big sugar factory. And there are a lot of really interesting sites too. It was my first experience with historic earthenworks, and I was very taken by some of those earthenworks. And kind of interestingly enough, they seem to be doing better than some of the other sites. So they were really well built and compacted and are experiencing as much of the erosion as some other areas. But to see that these were used throughout time, continued use as well. So the right bottom photo there is one of the earthworks that I think started off as something like a rice dam and then is later used. There's photos of people in the early 1900s driving their Model Ts across it because it became part of the road system through the area. So, and then some more interesting 20th century sites as well. There are a couple of still sites that we found, and lots of historic bottle dumps and things like that going on in the woods. So just a huge variety of different things to go see and monitor and learn about. So really cool. to get out there. We were able to put some of our cool tools and technology to use. So as we've talked about, we have a Faro Focus 350S terrestrial laser scanner, and we worked at a couple different sites there to document the some standing structures, ruins of standing structures that are there. But we also did a lot with the Aero GNSS receiver, both in mapping shorelines, but also just in collecting more data. And it made navigating to the sites a lot easier. It's basically an antenna that connects to a cell phone, and we used it in tandem with the ArcGIS Collector app to be able to locate the sites, to be able to take, updated GIS information where necessary, to be able to mark specific features that we may have found or specific artifacts that we found out on the sites, and then, come back to the desk and update all of the paperwork as needed based on that. We did have a lot of accessibility issues and lots of fun, great field stories. From T and Trials, we have the what's your best worst field story that you can now laugh about, and we definitely have a few from all the efforts out there. We did hike out to a lot of sites and did some driving, but eventually we had to get on boats to access some of the sites. They were too far into the woods, or just easier to kind of come up on a boat. We got the boat stuck one day. I got chased off of an island by hogs another day that we were out kayaking. So, and just the thick vegetation, a lot of these sites, they do have some sites that are open to the public and, kind of well cleared and maintained. But a lot of the sites are just off in the woods somewhere. So we had to hike through crazy vegetation. The two right photos are from the day that Emma and I went to go find a creek crossing, and because of the change in environment and hydrology, it was now just a swampy mess and not very fun to walk through. And we also got chased by hogs that day. So lots of running through. And the biggest accessibility issue we had is just the environment's just so much wetter than it used to be. So trying to even get on the roads to access some of the sites in the Addison Blockhouse Park, we just couldn't do it for months and months until it dried out. And even when we thought it was dry enough, we still got the truck stuck because the roads were just mud bogs still. So as for the scanning projects, we scanned the kind of main sugar factory buildings for Bulow Plantation, and we're able to document that and create quite a number of deliverables. So we have point clouds and a 3D model, and it was really interesting to kind of walk all over the site there and see it in person, but then to come back and look at the data, as Sarah kind of hinted at earlier, to see where some of the lowest spots were really became apparent, especially when we printed the model. I didn't quite have enough of a base on the first model and ended up with giant holes in the bottom just because the landscape there was so much lower than the surrounding area. But this is a really cool tool that we've realized can help with site interpretation as well for folks who are visually impaired. And so we were able to print the model and gave it to, here's Park Manager Phil, very excited to see the results of our efforts out at that site. We also scanned the McHardy Mill, which is another site. So whereas Bulow, we chose to scan because it is such a public site and we wanted it to have an even bigger reach and more interpretive value to, more tools to help interpret the site. This is a site that's kind of off in the woods. It was really hard for us to relocate because of several factors, including dense vegetation growth. And so this was one that we wanted to document what it looked like today, to be able to kind of have a baseline of comparison to hopefully it remains intact and well, but it was definitely, it has some threat levels there. So we got out and documented that site as well. So some of the biggest threats and impacts that we saw, some insights that we had from this whole suite of work. Really the biggest impact that we're seeing is hydrological changes. And as not professional folks who can pinpoint exactly these things, you can definitely see it playing out on the ground. And Phil talked a lot about this. He's been at the park for 10 years, and sites that were wet are super wet, and sites that were never wet are just totally inundated, and just how much water has been dumped in the system too, with the storms and the nor'easters and just constant rainstorms. This is the spring house at Bulow Plantation, and you can't even get anywhere near it because it's just standing water most of the year at this point. So, that's definitely impacting the sites, but it's also impacting the accessibility to the sites in that a lot of the roads are flooding and muddy and you can't access them. Hogs, just so many hogs all throughout the site. We never quite saw them, which is probably a good thing, but we heard them, we smelled them, and we saw their wallers and their rooting, and a lot of damage across a lot of different sites and a lot of different environments from the hogs. So definitely big impacts from those guys. And development's a huge threat. The parklands are protected, they're under conservation by the state of Florida, but the development's encroaching. The development's been going on for centuries. So there's all these crazy canals and channels that have been cut throughout the landscape. And in some cases, this is cut sites in half or move sites around in a lot of ways. And even accessing some of the sites, you have to drive literally through people's backyards to get to some of them. So that's definitely an encroachment and things that are happening. And we've seen in other areas, that the development can change how the landscape drains. So that could be part of what's happening with some of this hydrological change as well. There's tons and tons of undocumented resources in the parks as well. Phil has an extensive knowledge on the historic documents there and can tell you all about all sorts of things that happened on the park. But a lot of these are very ephemeral, so we know that there was something that happened, but there's maybe not the best archaeological evidence that's left, or the areas just haven't really been surveyed as well as they could have, or things like that just show things like a huge turpentine site that was just never recorded. So getting back out, and there's definitely plenty more work to do to go and kind of marry up the resources that we find on the ground with some of this historic documentation and get a lot more reported. And then erosion, there's so many shorelines in this park, be it natural river shorelines or just these ditches and drainage canals and things that are cut throughout the park. And that's just caused a lot of erosion. And it's also really impacting the coastal elements of the sites. And the vegetation is very helpful, and there are some really beautiful, strong marsh systems in the park, and they've also started putting in living shoreline in some areas. And so that can be very helpful in protecting these sites. But we also saw just a ton of tree falls, and not just on the shoreline, but also in the little where the ground was inundated through some of the storms and the flooding, the storm surges that we were seeing. And then when it starts to dry out, the trees just go over. And I mean, tree falls bigger than me that have just ripped out huge chunks of the site. So seeing those impacts is a lot. Phil wanted to be here today, and he had some last minute things come up, but he did send us a few notes just about the impacts that this project has had for the park. He commented that the work is critical since some site locations aren't known. He's been there, as I say, at least a decade, and is very aware and interested in some of these sites, and has gone out looking for some that are recorded and can't quite pinpoint exactly where they are. Maybe it was a general vicinity recorded site, but where exactly on this big square of the landscape is the site, or is there any evidence left that you could spot. So just getting out and verifying that, and making sure the GIS data was up to date has been a really crucial part of the project. Visiting the site with expert increases knowledge of the land managers, and this gets passed to staff. And I think he's always very interested to go out and learn from us, and especially having folks like Dr. John Endonino come out, who's done a lot of research and work in the area on the Native American components of the sites. But I would say, we're learning from him too, because he just has such an extensive knowledge of the landscape and the changes that he's seeing, and the history and all the things that happen. So it really has been this great collaboration to learn from one another. Increased information adds to park interpretation. And, it's not just the work that they're doing, but we've also, some of our future plans are to do more public programming and to be able to share some of the insights that we found. As well as some of the cool things that we've done with the 3D modeling. And we've worked with John to do 3D models of some of the artifacts that he's uncovered at the site as well. And working with FPAN creates an interagency familiarity, which promotes better cultural management. And this is true, we had some incidents of looting, and we were able to kind of connect him to the right people at BAR and kind of share resources and figure out what was going on, and not just in that situation, but in a couple of other things. So it's definitely, one of the reasons that we've done so much work at the park is just because they're so delightful and welcoming and interested and want the help and want to collaborate. And so I think that just really strengthens all of the things that we are tasked with doing, at each agency and organization and also. Quick overview there for months of work, but I'd just like to say a special thanks to Phil and all of his wonderful park staff. We got to go out with a handful of different rangers, and we even had some volunteers out getting us unstuck with the tractor. And then of course to Bart for his technical expertise with our 3D modeling.